about brains. Parents can change their brains. Coaches can change their brains. The concept is neuroplasticity. So we don't need to shame and blame and fire these coaches like they do with these college coaches. It's not the way to fix the problem. The way to fix the problem is to say, look, I have been behaving in this way. I've got an ingrained neural network like an addict has. I need to go fix it. If you send me away for 3 weeks and use all that surplus money you have, I'm a great coach. I'm pretty brilliant. I know the game inside out, but I have trouble with this neural network that got hammered into me when I was an athlete. So I want to make a change. And if coaches and teachers and parents even could self-identify and say, look, I'm not a bad person. Don't shame me. Don't blame me. Just get me the help I need. Like going back to what you said about the All Blacks, we would have a very different youth culture around sports and everything else.
I agree. And that really is the problem. So you mentioned it already. It's grooving, right? We groove as human beings. We groove certain things, and they say, there's a higher instance of abuse performed by people who themselves were abused, right? Mm-hmm. Because it creates that process, right? And so a lot of times what happens is coaches pass on what was passed on to them, and they don't even know it's a bad thing because that's the way it was done with them. And sometimes they don't even know they're doing it because it's become habitual. It's how they were nurtured, right? Nurture created some of these behavioral patterns.
Definitely. Because
behaviors are just outward expressions of feelings, internal feelings and processes that are happening inside of us, right? And those are created by us and and how we interact with the world around us. But I wanted to jump on because I meant to address this earlier when you brought it up, the myelination, the coaches screaming at children. If you have a coach that does this, or you are a coach that does this, and you're like, but I'm getting results, I don't see anything wrong with that. If you truly care about development, which is the buzzword of the decade right now, right? Child development, athlete development, talent development. This is what we're doing. We're developing. And I hear it's the buzzword. It's like, if you want to get the players to come to your club, you use the word development, and all the parents come flocking to you like, he develops players. If you really believe in that, okay, I want to bring this up. You brought it up, the myelin, okay? When the brain, skill is just basically when the neurons in the brain fire, and the electrical impulse is sent from one synapse to another, right? And there are chemicals that are involved too. So I'm really simplifying it, but it's basically like the transfer. It's a little teeny train, and he's running from one station to the other. And the faster you get that train to run, and the more often you get that train to run, and the more efficient that train is running, and the more on time it is, the better it is, right? And that's skill building right there. Is the faster, more effective, more efficient that neuron fires without misfires, that becomes a skill. The brain prunes back neurons that aren't firing like that and then enhances the ones that are. That's the neuroplasticity piece, right? And children have it more than us. Children start with billions of neurons, and then they prune out as they grow older because they, like language, for instance, you either become English speaking. If you're in a bilingual household but you only focus on one language, then that's the language you lean toward. So for those trains to run more efficiently, for that electrical impulse to run more efficiently, it needs to be wrapped in something. If the train were wrapped in a tunnel that's impenetrable by weather and obstacles and falling rocks and everything else, that train would run on time and efficiently as many times as you want. The myelin sheath is that tunnel. When you scream at children, the research shows that one of the things that is ruined is the myelin sheath is broken down. It's weaker, and it doesn't have integrity, structural integrity in brains who are chronically verbally abused. So, do the math. I'm a skill builder. I scream at my kids. You're damaging the actual structure that you need for them to groove the skill. The train can't run if the tunnel isn't built.
Yeah, and I think that is just golden information for coaches. I mean, if it's true that winning is the goal and it's their ego on the line and it's their salary on the line, well, then they should be the most excited about this information that in actual fact, if they want highly skilled, incredibly resilient athletes who have the ability to dig deep when things get demoralizing and exhausting and the weather's terrible and all the other, they have injuries even, terrible things that happen to teams, then they have to know myelination. It's like, it's the secret weapon. It's going to make your team be incredible. And yet you try to get that info out and people are resistant. They would rather rant and rave about wussification and you make athletes soft. It's really a shame because, as you've just laid it out, myelination is the grower of talent. It is what makes kids and adults perform at the highest level. So let's learn about how to make it happen. And along with you, the reading I've done shows that it's all about being demanding. You scaffold with every step, you support, you nurture, you make it possible for them to believe in themselves. You ignite that belief. You coach with a lot of wisdom and individual attention. And the next thing you know, you can't stop talent from growing. It's amazing. And that's based on research. That's not how I was raised or how I was taught or what my coaches told me. That's based on research. So I think your message, and I think your TED Talk about this, the book that you have coming out on Echoes Beyond the Game, the work that you're doing with John O'Sullivan in Changing the Game Project is invaluable. And if I was coaching, whether it's coaching kids in academics, coaching kids in sports, coaching kids to be better artists, or coaching them to launch their career, I would want that neuroscientific information, and I'd like to know those key tools that you have so that I can create resilient, brilliant, talented young people. So we don't have too much time left, but I wanted to ask you in this last few moments that we have to talk about if you were a coach and you'd had a series of complaints against you and you were feeling pretty threatened and pretty afraid and like you'd worked incredibly hard and it wasn't being acknowledged, and you have won a lot of games, but you do have these complaints. What should a coach do? What is the first, second, and third step to help themselves make that shift or change that can be so hard to do?
So I would say, as a governing body or as an organization, we need two pieces in place. One, we need a reporting system, which we've talked ad nauseum about.
Yeah.
We need an anonymous reporting system that protects the children. Two, and it requires an investigation before any guilt is charged on anybody, right? We need to investigate and verify. And then the other thing is we need a system in place for the coaches. We have it in HR. That's what HR in companies is. Somebody does something and we have training for them, and we have a way to, we don't just say, you're done, pack your box and leave when somebody does something, when somebody crosses a standard or a line or breaks a policy. We try to help them fix that. If I'm a coach, that system in place, it makes it a lot easier. If I'm a coach and I'm suddenly realizing, oh my gosh, I've got these complaints against me, I have to step back and go to my why. Why am I here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Because if my why has nothing to do with the children, if it has nothing to do with something bigger than me, then I'm not in the right spot. If you're grounded in your why, the next thing you have to look at, step 2, would be, I need help. And I need help outside of my current sphere of knowledge and influence. Because the problem we have is everybody silos themselves in, and they will only listen to the people who agree with what they say and do. We refuse to listen to the people who disagree with what we say and do. And I sometimes learn a whole lot more when I get into a debate with somebody who's on the opposite side of the coin. Because, hey, it's Sun Tzu. I'm learning their position. They're telling me their strategy. They're telling me their belief system. They're showing me their research. And so I'm either able, like Sun Tzu, to pick it apart, or I'm able to go, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? That's great. I need to incorporate that. So that as coaches, we need to set the ego aside and say, I need to go to people outside of the group of the sphere of influence that'll just be yes people. I need to go to the research that's opposite of what I'm doing and learn more about it. And then the third thing would be, you need to go to the science. We go to the science everywhere else. Doctors, lawyers, nurses, firemen, every other profession, they go to the science and they get best practices out of the science. If Elon Musk was building rockets to go to the moon and he wasn't looking at the science, we'd think he's absolutely nuts. He looked at the science, and Elon Musk admitted he didn't just look at the science, he looked at the science in other disciplines and used the crossover to create the sweet spot. So as coaches, the third thing you need to do is go to the science. Study it. Understand it. Because empirical data, the raw empirical data can't lie to us. If it was peer reviewed and it's got good validity and reliability, it's legitimate research, use it. It's been proven.
Yeah. Especially in this day and age where there's this really kind of groundswell of hypermasculinity, really misogynistic, homophobic, and for whatever reason, it's really glomming onto the sport world. And that's a place where you'd most like to see it kept at bay because it has no place in sports. Sports is so much about empathy, knowing what the other person's thinking, understanding what move they're going to make because you're so hyper aware and so informed. And it's really interesting to see that attempt to railroad sports away from its true value in society, which is, as you said, it goes back to evolutionary times. It's grounded on principles that are traditional, that has to do with teamwork and achieving something together. And the second the coach becomes the outlier in that, and the person that doesn't want that intense care and concern and compassion, it just blows it all up. And yeah, I fully agree that science is the answer, and it's the way that we can just hold at bay that that messaging that's coming out that's really just lacking in any kind of core value or science or meaning of any kind. It's showing up everywhere in politics, and sports is a way to pull it back. And I'm really excited about the work you're doing and the knowledge you bring, the insights and the neuroscientific work that's really informing your speaking gigs that you do internationally, the workshops you give, and the books that you're writing. I think it's invaluable. And personally for me, if I was coaching a team, I would go and take a look at Reed Maltbie's work. I would look at Changing the Game. I would learn all about Inside Out Initiative from Joe Ehrman. I would study the work done and the approach of John Wooden, because I would want to bring out the best in my athletes. And so I'd like to thank you for being here today, Reed. It was amazing to hear your approach, your knowledge, the care that you have about sports and about coaches and about kids and their parents, and the fact that you aren't this kind of divisive force that's trying to somehow make coaches and parents enemies and kids and coaches enemies. No, we all want this youth sports thing and sports in general to be an integral part of our culture. So it is time that we started listening better to one another.
I completely agree. And I was just going to say that I think it was Newton that said that he stood on the shoulders of giants. He could see so far because he stood on the shoulders of giants. And that's what we do. If you look at our stuff at Changing the Game and you look at the stuff I'm doing, I'm going out to the giants, the people who are smarter than me in their fields, and I'm soaking up what they have and I'm sharing it and I'm using it. And that's what we need to do. So it's I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm going and finding the smartest people in the room, and then I'm making sure I know what they're saying so that you know what they're saying. And that's how we get better. Right? We stand on each other's shoulders.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's why we share so much in common, because it's exactly what I'm doing too, a little more focused on teachers, but they also would really benefit from the neuroscience. And I just had a phone call today with a career counselor who works at University of Victoria, and we talked about how neuroscience is the missing piece in the school to work transition. So I'm pretty excited about this new science, and it's so constructed on years of psychology and educational and sport research and all those giants you're talking about. And it's just confirming for us what we know deep within, which is that, you come at children from the heart and from a place of wanting to learn and be your best self, and you will be amazed at what you're able to achieve. So thanks again, Reed. This was Reed Maltbie today on 21st Century Coach. We had a great conversation about the ways in which we can keep youth sports at the center of our culture and something that allows our children to become athletes for life and fulfill their potential. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you for having me.